All the girls drink. It's just that I'm the one that gets caught. Story of my life. I always get the fuzzy end of the lollipop.
That's kind of gross. Wait, what does that even mean? Fuzzy end of the lollipop?
It doesn't
Is
really
it like
mean
in
anything,
your
does it?
pocket and it's got a bunch of dust on it? What does that even
It's
mean?
like someone else sucked off all the sweet stuff and all you get is the stick. That's kind of fuzzy. Because someone else has been sucking on it.
All right.
Very evocative, if nothing else.
Yeah. But also, how long have lollipops been around? I don't know. Like, how long have lollipops been a
They've been around
candy?
since at least 1959. I can
At
tell you
least
that.
1959. Hold on.
All right.
Hold on. When was the first
Hold, please.
lollipop? 1908.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, did you ever see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang?
Of course.
Remember they have the whole candy factory? I feel like there's some lollipops in there. And that was
Probably.
taking place in the 1900s or 19-teens.
No.
Toot Sweets? Those weren't
Chitty Chitty
lollipops,
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was, wait, that movie was released way after that.
Released, yeah, it was made in the 60s, but it takes place in like 1912.
Oh, okay. I'm
or
like,
something
that
like
movie definitely was not made in the teens. I can guarantee it.
It's the very first color and sound movie, and also Dick Van Dyke time travel
And flying cars.
Yeah.
Dang. Okay. Anyway.
Welcome to Your Pick, a film podcast. I'm Geneva.
And I'm Tatum.
We are two friends who love movies and love sharing them with each other. Each week we take turns picking a film that is close to our hearts and talk about why it moves us, to tears, to laughter, and everything in between. We celebrate the craft of filmmaking as well as the unique and personal ways we find meaning in the movies we watch. All right, Tatum, what have you been watching this week?
So we literally just talked about this before we started recording.
Reiterate everything you just told me.
Yeah,
off
I'll
mic.
repeat everything. Yeah. So, okay. One thing to add that I didn't tell you before the podcast. So I tried to start watching the show Killing Eve. It's been on my list for a very long time, and I couldn't make it through the first episode. So
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, speaking of dark shows, it's a very, very dark show. And I would be willing to try it again, seeing as how I barely even finished the first episode. I'm sure it's not like a representation of the whole show, because a lot of shows take a while to get going and establish themselves. But yeah, I tried to start watching Killing Eve, didn't pan out. Maybe it will again sometime in the future.
Yeah. People really love that show, or at least they love the
Yeah.
first season. I've heard that it goes down in later seasons, but the first season has pretty universal acclaim from what I've heard.
I think it won like a bunch of Emmys, if I remember correctly. But yeah. And then two other things that I've been watching. One is I started watching the television show BoJack Horseman this week. I won't go into a lot of detail about it because Geneva and I just talked about it for like 10 minutes before we started recording. But yeah, BoJack Horseman is an adult cartoon that is a Netflix original. It was a show that I tried to start watching in when I was in college, but I couldn't really get into it, so I kind of stopped. But recently, a person who is very close to me recommended the show, and they spoke very highly of it. And I was like, okay, well, I'll give it another chance. We can watch it together. And I love the show. It's really, really good. I can't say that I enjoy watching it. It's incredibly dark and depressing and upsetting and anger-inducing and all of the negative emotions, basically, this show pulls out of you. But at the same time, for some reason, I can't stop watching. It's just such an introspective show. It makes you think about life and think about what's important and what's not, and how the decisions we make affect other people. And so yeah, BoJack is, for people who don't know, it's essentially a show that follows the character BoJack Horseman. He was he was like a star of a sitcom that was really famous 15 years prior. And since then, he's kind of become a has-been. And as a result of that, he's become a terrible alcoholic who basically abuses everyone around him. And you get bits and pieces of his past and how tragic his childhood was growing up, and how all of that is just manifesting now in him basically like destroying every single relationship that he has. And the sad thing is that he's entirely self-aware of his faults and his issues, but he refuses to do anything to correct those and make any efforts to get out of it. And so, yeah, it's a really good show, very well written. It has really great ideas and it's super profound, but at the same time, it's very heavy. It's a super heavy watch. But yeah, if anyone's interested in watching a show that is incredibly depressing and will make you feel terrible, but is also very well written and prompts a lot of interesting, important questions, I would recommend BoJack Horseman. And yeah, that's it. Because I was going to say I watched 2 things this week, but the other one is Some Like It Hot. So, oh, no. I watched, Smartless. So a podcast that I listened to, it's called Smartless, and it's hosted by Will Arnett, Sean Hayes, and Jason Bateman. And it's basically them just like, they bring on guests who are, famous people of all different kinds, and they just talk to them and joke around for like an hour plus. And they went live on a tour in 2022, kind of going around the country and doing their podcast live in front of people. And so, anyway, so HBO Max, now called Max, whatever, has a series where they followed the guys around while they were on their tour, basically filming them in a documentary style format, just kind of watching them as they fly on their airplanes and stay in their hotels and take transportation to their, locations and things like that, while also showing highlights from the interviews in the venues. And so, yeah, it's a really fun watch. It's just nice to watch this trio just kind of hang out with each other and crack jokes because they're such good friends. They've all known each other for a really long time. But then on top of that, like seeing them as real people who get tired and have families and have a genuine friendship where they kind of care for each other and look out for each other. So yeah, it's been a pleasant watch. I'm enjoying it. And I look forward to finishing it. So yeah, that's what I've been watching. BoJack, Smartless, and a little bit of Killing Eve. So yeah.
Great. Yeah. So I haven't watched a whole lot since our last record, which was, again, only a few days ago.
Oh, yeah.
I rewatched a couple of movies recently, though. So I rewatched a movie called The Little Foxes, which I saw for the first time, I think, toward the end of last year. So I may actually have talked about it on the podcast before. I don't remember. I don't want to say too much if I talked about it before, but it's a movie from the early 40s with an incredible performance by Bette Davis, just about the corruption of the wealthy and how good people trying to do their best to stand up against people who are mired by greed and completely blinded to treating other people in their lives with any sort of thoughtfulness and dignity. And yeah, I would recommend that movie. I liked it even better the second time around. I think it's really well acted and really well written, really well directed. Definitely gave me sort of early seasons of Game of Thrones, the Lannisters hanging out, interacting with each other vibes in terms of the siblings' interactions with each other, where you get a sense of their history with each other, but also they're such greedy, grasping people. They would none of them would hesitate to stick a knife in each other's back, and it's just so compelling to watch. So anyway, Little Foxes.
We had 3 stocks to trade. You chopped one's head off and you let another escape. Father would be furious. Must be hard for you, being the disappointing child.
I should have known that Tatum would have a Lannister quote ready to go.
Do you want more quotes? I could use more.
All right, pile it on.
You love your children. It's one of your great qualities. That and your cheekbones.
That's a great one. That's an all-timer. Should go on a t-shirt.
I think it is on a t-shirt.
I'm sure someone somewhere would not have let that pass. All right. The other movie I rewatched recently was a sort of romantic melodrama. Seems a little bit too dismissive because it is pretty restrained, but a romantic drama from the late 30s called Intermezzo. And this movie is pretty notable for being the Hollywood debut of Ingrid Bergman. So the first movie that she made in Hollywood in English. She is so radiant in this movie. You can see why she became a huge star and just an absolute icon of the era. The movie itself it's okay. It's about a married violinist who has an affair with a young piano player. Ingrid Bergman is the young piano player. Leslie Howard is the married violinist. They have good chemistry. It's a sweet story, but I wouldn't say it's a fantastic movie apart from just how incredibly radiant Ingrid Bergman is, as she always is. So
sometimes that's all you need, though. Like if you have a strong performance, it really can carry a whole film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's worth watching if you love seeing Ingrid Bergman on screen. If you love watching portrayals of people bonding over playing classical music with each other. Always fun. She does a really good job, by the way, of, it really looks like she's playing the piano. I don't think the sound that you're hearing is actually her, but she's playing these extremely complicated pieces of classical music, and her fingers are matching all of the sounds that you're hearing. It's very impressive. So, yeah, Intermezzo.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. So today on the show, we are discussing the 1959 screwball comedy, Some Like It Hot, directed by Billy Wilder, starring Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, and Marilyn Monroe. So the story follows Joe and Jerry, two down-on-their-luck jazz musicians in 1920 Chicago, who accidentally witness a mob murder. To escape, they disguise themselves as women, calling themselves Josephine and Daphne.
Daphne?
Daphne? Well, I never did like the name Geraldine. And they join an all-female band for an extended gig in Miami. Hijinks ensue. Joe poses as a frigid millionaire in order to romance the band's lead singer, Sugarcane, played by Marilyn Monroe. Meanwhile, Jerry fights off the advances of a real millionaire, Osgood Fielding III, who wants to show Daphne a good time on the town. In the end, the gangsters catch up with them in Florida. A madcap chase ensues, identities are revealed, and the film ends with possibly the greatest final line in cinema history. Well, nobody's perfect.
With a huge smile on your face, just like, ah.
If anyone is listening to this and has not seen Some Like It Hot, I mean, walk, do not run. Go watch this movie.
So good.
It really deserves all of these jokes, these gags, these, back and forth. They deserve to be seen, for the first time in reality. But if nothing else,
I would also recommend watching it with a friend. Because this is a really fun movie to watch with a group of people.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Great movie for group watching. If nothing else, just go, or if it's been a long time since you've seen it, just go YouTube the final scene. It is so funny.
It's so good.
It's so good. All right.
It's streaming on Max, guys. Go watch it.
Oh, it is? Oh, I have it on DVD.
Wait, how did you watch it?
I have it on DVD.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
All right, Some Like It Hot. So it was a hit in 1959 with audiences and with critics, but it's only grown in esteem since then. Widely considered to be one of the greatest comedies ever made, its zany energy, rapid-fire dialogue, and genuinely daring exploration of sex and gender bending have kept it feeling sharp and hilarious almost 65 years later. Also timeless is its star, Marilyn Monroe, who struggled behind the scenes to make it through filming, but whose on-screen radiance and warmth are essential to balancing the movie's sense of cynical mischief. It's a movie about lines being blurred and redrawn, the status quo being upset and reset, and deception somehow turning out to be truth. All right, Tatum, how did you first come to this movie? Because I know this is not your first time seeing it.
Nope.
And what were your thoughts on this rewatch?
Well, So let me just say that I think that there is a legitimate argument that could be made that this is not one of, but the greatest comedy of all time. I'm not going to make that argument in this moment because I haven't prepared. But
I would need to see a top 10 list, but
yeah.
very, very strong case could be made.
Exactly. So not to show my hand too much, but I love this movie. But yeah, as far as my relationship with it, someone that I don't know if you guys know, but is a very beloved friend of mine, a lady named Geneva, showed me this movie for the first time. Gosh, how many years ago was it? Was it during?
I don't remember.
Was it during 2020 when we like didn't have anything else to do, or was it before that? Maybe it was before that. I think it was before.
It's so hard to remember. Was it around the time that we tried to watch On the Waterfront and didn't make it through?
It was around that time.
Because I feel like that was during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way,
Which,
it was 2019
note,
or 2020.
On the Waterfront is a great movie. I did later make it through.
Yes.
And it's fantastic. But that time around, we were just
watching it too late at night. That's what it was. Yeah, we started it way too late. But anyway, yeah. But so yes. Geneva showed me this movie a few years ago, and it was a movie, like, quite honestly, I'm not going to say I'd never heard of it because it kind of rung a bell, but it was not on my radar at all. So Geneva was just like, Tatum, let's pop this movie in. I think you'll enjoy it. It's pretty funny. And, I trust Geneva's opinion. So I was like, sure, why not?
Thank you.
And yeah, I loved it. It was it was a huge surprise because, again, I didn't know anything about it. So when I saw these men and then their first time like dressed up as women falling on their heels trying to like do their little walk at the train station, I was like, I did not know that this is what I was in for, but I am here for it. So yeah, I think
we need to talk about it, but it's so funny how long the movie takes to set up where it's going.
Exactly.
And then once the reveal happens, it's
so great.
Perfect.
It's so great. But yeah, so I think the first time around, I really just enjoyed it for the vibes. Like, it was just so funny, and just such a pleasant, really, like, genuinely really fun watch. And this time around, because I kind of knew what I was getting into, I think I was able to see past the comedy. Still enjoy the comedy, but I was able to appreciate a lot of the really, for lack of a better word, like woke messaging that exists in this film. This movie is very feminist. This movie is
very ahead of its time.
Yes, this movie is very, I suppose you could make an argument that it's not the case, but in my opinion, there's a lot of gender fluidity and sexual orientation fluidity that is happening in this film, but in a way that's not making fun of it in a way that's disrespectful. It's like, it's appreciating it in a funny way. So yeah, I think I enjoyed this movie more the second time than I did the first time because I was cracking up at every single joke that happened because it's so dang funny. But then also just being impressed by just how progressive this was for its time, and also how it's still like, it hasn't aged poorly. It's aged really well. And I think that is extremely impressive for a story of this kind of nature. Not to mention, like, the acting performances and the costumes and, the blocking of the actors, and this movie is so good. So yeah, I loved it. I'm glad that Geneva gave me the motivation to watch it again. I was going to watch it again eventually, but it wasn't something that I was like itching to watch again. But I think that this needs to be a film that I watch every year. It's so fun. And unfortunately, because of its age, meaning like the year that it came out, I feel like there's a lot of people that haven't seen it that are younger. And so I'm like, I want to spread the love. I want to do for other people what Geneva did for me. Show this movie to more people because it's really freaking good. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. I I don't remember exactly when I first saw this movie, honestly. I remember having to watch it for a film comedies class that I took in college, but I think I had maybe seen it before that. I don't think that was the first time I had watched it. But I've seen it, rewatched it a handful of times over the years. Every single time I see it, I find something new to appreciate. I rewatched it. I showed it to a couple of friends last year while I was doing my master's, and just sitting with them, kind of, how every time you show someone something that you love and they've never seen it before, all of a sudden you're noticing new things because you're watching it as if they are seeing it for the first time. Like, it was just that experience for me where all of a sudden all of these layers were jumping out to me, and I was like, oh my goodness, this movie has so much to say about gender dynamics and power dynamics and all of these different things. So yeah, this movie is just, it's so perfect. It's so funny. It's so timeless. It's so relevant. It has so much to say. It really does hold up. And yeah, there's just, I can't say enough good things about it. I really can't. The performances are so good. I mean,
so good.
I'm a huge Marilyn Monroe fan, just in general. I haven't seen all of her movies, but I've seen quite a few. I love her, everything that I've seen her in. She's just so radiant on screen. She's underrated, I think, for her comedic timing, and she's great in this movie. Jack Lemmon obviously is just absolute force of nature in this movie. It's no wonder that he and Billy Wilder went on to do half a dozen collaborations or however many it was.
I feel like Tony Curtis steals the show for me. I mean, all of the performances are absolutely incredible, but I feel like Tony really, I'm like, dang, son, this is incredible what you're doing.
Yeah, we should talk about it, because I feel like I sometimes overlook Tony Curtis in this movie, but what he's doing is so, I think it's just because it's a little more subdued than what Jack Lemmon is doing. He's okay, but it's not like he's playing the straight man. They play the straight man against each other, and also the funny, like, they keep switching places in their dynamics. Exactly. You can't assign one of them the straight one and the other one the funny one, because they're constantly switching places. It's so impressive. They have such great chemistry with each other. So yeah, this movie is brilliant. Billy Wilder's brilliant. I love Billy Wilder. We've established this before.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you, where does this movie rank for you in terms of Billy Wilder films?
Oh,
is this your favorite, or?
Oh, that's such a good question.
I mean, you've seen so many, but.
Yeah, hang on. Let me pull up the list. Got to do a quick little look through, because I mean, we've talked about this a little bit before when we did The Apartment episode, but for anyone who's unaware, Billy Wilder has an insane
really
filmography.
Really crazy in a good way.
Insane. So Major and the Minor, Double Indemnity, Lost Weekend, Sunset Boulevard.
Oh, Double Indemnity is your favorite, I feel
Double Indemnity is probably my favorite, but this is probably second, or maybe The Apartment. Oh, it's so hard.
Don't forget
There's
Sunset.
Just so many bangers. Sunset Boulevard, Sabrina, 7 Year Itch, Witness for the Prosecution, Some Like It Hot, The Apartment. Yeah,
I've seen a fair amount of his movies, I'm realizing.
Yeah. He's one of those directors he's one of those directors that really can do any genre.
He's done so many different genres that I forget that movie was made by him, or that movie was made by him. Because, we've got Double Indemnity, which is a noir, and then Sunset
one of
Boulevard,
the greatest noirs of all time,
which is kind of like a thriller almost in my mind. And then, Some Like It Hot, which is a comedy, The Apartment, which is like a rom-com more type of dynamic. Sabrina, I've seen once before. I don't remember what it's about, to be honest. But, yeah, I mean, these are just all across the board. Those are the only ones that I've seen, but even so, I wouldn't watch Double Indemnity and then watch Some Like It Hot and think that it was made by the same person if I didn't already know that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. It's insane that one person can do all of that. But yeah.
Hot take. Billy Wilder's a good director.
Hot take.
Hot take.
I know. Wild thoughts. All right, so why don't we get into the movie? Let's talk about it a little bit. So, as I mentioned, one thing I was really struck by rewatching this movie is I forgot how long it takes to set up everything that happens. And it is funny how, so I was looking up the production of this movie. The script of this movie is, it is in the adapted screenplay category because it's actually based on a French film from the 30s, which had that same premise of two male musicians who have to disguise themselves as women in order to get a job in an all-female band. But that movie did not have any sort of, from what I read, that movie didn't have any sort of gangster subplot. That is something that Billy Wilder added, and his writing partner, I.A.L. Diamond, who wrote a lot of his films with him. That's something that they added to this movie to kind of give it a little more, propulsion, basically. And it is, I was rewatching, I was like, they do such a great job with the tone of this, because starting with a brutal gangster murder is kind of strange in a comedy, but they do somehow manage to make it funny. I mean, the whole opening scene in which a policeman visits a speakeasy. So this is 1920s Chicago. Prohibition is on. In order to drink, you have to be underground and doing it in secret. So this police officer is visiting a speakeasy in preparation for a raid, and the speakeasy is designed as a funeral parlor, and so everyone's kind of winking about like, oh, I'm here for the funeral of the old lady. I'm gonna
he explicitly says, like, I don't remember the exact line, but he's like, you never know, there could be a raid.
Yeah. The part where he's like, I want some booze, and they're like, we don't serve booze, we just serve coffee. Scotch coffee, Canadian coffee. It's like wink wink. Like, it's so funny.
I saw one review on Letterboxd. Someone wrote like, I can't stop, or like, the only thing I'm thinking about is that one poor guy that never got his coffee or something like that.
I want another cup of coffee. I know, the gangsters take him out and you think like, oh no, they're gonna go kill him, and then like next scene, there he is still asking for his coffee. He's fine. Yep. Yeah. I love how it's just such a small thing, but in the funeral parlor, everything's so quiet and solemn. And they open the secret back door and it's so loud. And you're like, what incredible soundproofing they have in the speakeasy.
Yep. I just wanted to note that. So I was, again, watching it this time, I just was paying attention to things that I wasn't paying attention to last time. I feel like this movie opens with a really incredible action sequence. The stunts with the car are really, really impressive to me. Like, they've got cars whipping around corners and smashing into fences. And I'm just like, wow, this is really impressive that they're pulling this off with those types of vehicles that are really old and making it look real and believable and dangerous. And I just found that opening car action sequence to be really impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it genuinely could have come out of like a Scarface or The French Connection or something, some other genre. You're not expecting it to turn into a comedy. Also makes me wonder, if Billy Wilder had ever decided to turn to a straight action film. I don't know that he ever, can't think of any that he did off the top of his head, but I'm sure it would have been great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have the speakeasy. We meet the musicians there, Jerry and Joe, and they're just these down on their luck guys who are constantly squabbling with each other. Again, Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon, they just have such great chemistry with each other. I love how Tony Curtis, Joe, is somehow always what silver tongue he has. He's always able to talk Jerry into his. You would think that Jerry is the one, because he's the more manic one, that he's the one coming up with the harebrained schemes, but it's not. It's Joe. And yet somehow Joe is able to talk Jerry, who's the more sensible one, into all of his schemes. And then Jerry is just complaining about how it leaves them in a worse spot. It's like, you didn't have to do what Joe said. You didn't have to hawk your overcoat and put the money on the dog. And yet somehow Joe tells you to do it, and then you do it.
It reminds me a little bit of the dynamic in White Christmas, where it's like, oh, you're a lonely, miserable, unhappy man. And and Bing Crosby's character, I forget their names because I haven't seen that movie since Christmas, but their dynamic of just Bing Crosby kind of being the more solemn, grounded guy of like, this is a little bit too risky. Like, maybe we should think this through first. And then the other guy just being like, no, let's just do it. It's going to be fine. Like, let's just hop on we'll give our tickets to these ladies and then we'll try and get onto the train and we'll sleep in the club car. Like,
I mean, it's a classic comedic, comedic duo archetypes is the more risk averse one and the more carefree one, and the more manic one and the less manic one. And I mean, again, they're always changing places in terms of which one is the one who's being sensible and which one is not. But I also think about that the sequence when they go to, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's just kind of a big office where there's a bunch of agents or whoever they are that help give them gigs, and they just like
open
a job
the door
agency, but for musicians specifically.
Yeah, and they just open the door and everyone's just like, nope. 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 And then the one door, it's like, oh, well, maybe if Joe like schmoozes his way, and then Jerry's kind of just standing there like, oh, brother, I mean, it works.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, he can talk anyone into anything. He can apparently talk this woman that he straight up jilted, like straight up stood up at their last date, somehow talks her into letting them borrow her car so they can drive it like 100 miles in the snow. It doesn't make any sense. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, he's got game. He's definitely a successful con man, I feel like. Well, in certain ways he's successful, in other ways he's not, but yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they're down on their luck. Their job at the speakeasy's just been raided, so they're out of work. They're trying to find some job. They hear about this job where they need two female musicians to go down to Florida and play in this band. And I love, kind of foreshadowing for the way his character goes in the rest of the movie, I love how quick Jerry is to jump to the idea of, why don't we disguise ourselves as women and take this job? Like, there is nothing prompting him. There's no one after them. There's no reason they need to get out of town at this point. He's just like, oh, we could do that. And Joe's like, no, we couldn't. And Jerry's like, sure, we could.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah. I find it to be so interesting how, I mean, I feel like Jerry genuinely enjoys, being this woman side of himself, whereas Joe kind of just does it when he needs to. I mean, I don't think he hates it, but it's not something where he's like readily, wanting to dress in this outfit whenever he gets the chance. Like, Jerry's like, I'm gonna put on a bathing suit and a swim cap and go to like
I'm gonna
frolic
chat
in
with the
water.
girls and we're all gonna like hang out and boy talk and share lipstick with each other. It's so good.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you get these two sides of the sort of male experience in this, in this type of situation, because you have the Joe side of it, which is, I feel like his experience of it is a lot being a woman. He sees a lot of the sort of inconveniences and, like downsides of being a woman. He gets harassed by that stupid like bellboy, creepy child bellboy who's like, hey doll, I have a passkey to your room. Like, what a creep. He gets like pinched and looked at, and like, he sees all the like, he becomes a more, I think, compassionate and understanding man through the experience of living as a woman, because he's literally living in the shoes of someone else, of someone he's always kind of degraded and treated as disposable. And I mean, this is not a movie that's like super moralistic. It's not like he comes out the other end and is like, I now understand and I will be a perfect boyfriend. Like, you don't really think he's gonna
he's
change
still
all that much, but
lied to a woman for days to get her to fall in love with him. Like,
Yeah, but there is that satisfaction of seeing someone who is, that kind of charming fuckboy, basically, finally get his comeuppance in a certain sense. But then you have the Jerry side of the experience, which is just like, oh, I really like this. Oh, this is like freeing to some.
He's having
this is liberating
so much
to some
fun.
Side of me.
Jerry is living his best life.
He really
this whole movie.
Yeah, in ways that you would not expect.
I genuinely think that by the end of this movie, I do think that Osgood and Jerry will get married. Like, I genuinely think that they will.
But there are laws, conventions.
Well,
Doesn't
okay, I
matter.
guess in this time they technically couldn't be married, but because laws.
I mean,
but
you could definitely see them becoming partners, like long-term
Oh,
partners.
absolutely. I mean, Jerry's totally into it.
Jerry's
Osgood
fine with it.
obviously.
He's like, Jerry's got the security. That's all he wants.
Yeah, Osgood like has had the hots for Jerry since the second he saw. It's just like. I feel like we shouldn't even call him Jerry. We should call him Daphne. It's like, because he just becomes Daphne, and he is Daphne by the end. And I think, anyway, yeah, Jerry/Daphne living their best life, and I'm here for it.
Oh my goodness. All right, where were we? I was sort of vaguely going through the plot, even though this actually is like a pretty plotty, well-structured movie. It's just so much of it is so light and zany that it's kind of hard. But yeah, in terms of the plot, so the two of them, they have to go to a gig, and they're in the garage trying to retrieve the car when they are wrong place, wrong time, accidentally witness this mob murder. I think it's vaguely based on something called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Chicago, which was like a real life, gangster massacre that occurred. But the two of them managed to escape, but they're seen by the gangster leader, Spats Columbo, which is such a great gangster name. And he's played by George Raft, who was like this actor who'd been in a lot of gangster movies throughout Golden Age Hollywood. So kind of like a recognizable shorthand for, gangster boss. He has these nice shiny white spats that are his character trait, his like sole character trait, which is great. But yeah, the two of them, they have to escape. They have to get out of Chicago. Where can they go? They dress up as women, somehow acquire a full female wardrobe and wigs on very short notice. And the next thing you see is
Let's be
their
honest, Jerry
legs.
had them in his closet. They've been in his closet for years.
Yeah. He's like, oh, my girlfriend left it behind. I just haven't had the heart to throw it out. But
right, exactly.
But yeah, the next thing we see is them at the train station, and it's their legs.
No.
Attempting to walk in high heels. What?
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess you just
Yeah. Well,
changed
we start.
it. But I
We
was
start
like,
on
we
their
don't
legs
even see
walking
them
in high
first.
heels.
We just see their little feet, like click, 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 click.
Yeah.
Like, their little
Looking
steps.
so uncomfortable.
Okay, this is something, again, I didn't notice the first time I watched it, but I loved it in this movie because I think it's intentional that they do this. But the fact that the first time we see them, dressed like this is this scene where they do not even know how to walk in these heels. It's super funny and like really awkward, and they're basically falling over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of them literally falls when getting onto the train. But then by the end, they are sprinting.
They
like,
grow into it
so fast. Like, I could not even run that fast. I don't know anyone that can run that fast in heels. They are like giving it their all by the end. And I just love that kind of subtle arc of showing their journey.
It's called character growth. It's
great.
An arc.
I love
great
it.
writing. Yeah.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So yeah, I mean that opening shot of just their little feet and just being like, oh man, I know where this is going. And then you get the reveal of their whole getup, and it's just, it's amazing. I love it.
Yeah. So they introduce themselves to the Sweet Sue, the lady who's the conductor of the band, and Beanstalk, her little kind of Weasley manager guy who tries to help her keep everything in line, which of course they totally fail at. I feel like we see a little bit here.
He's great.
He's so great. Beanstalk. Every time something goes wrong. We see here a little bit of the sort of commentary that the movie has about different, about the female experience and gender roles for women in that sort of late 50s, early 60s period. Gender roles are pretty rigid around this time. But this sort of, the idea of there being sort of different types of women, the Daphne and Josephine are presenting themselves as, they went to this conservatory. So they're kind of more high class women. They've got the high class morals. They're like, we better watch our language around these dames.
I love it. I love it.
It's so good. It's so good. Of course, later on, they're like, oh yeah, conservatory. They let us out for good behavior.
We were there for 1 year. Didn't you say 3 years? We got up. Yeah, for good behavior. Or something like that.
Yeah, it's so funny. But yeah, that idea that like, as women being in our even being in our own sort of female only space, we need to sort of be policing each other, policing our behavior. We need to be keeping a sort of moral standard here. There's this whole idea, I mean, when they meet Sugar and the rest of the girls, like all the girls drink, they all sleep around, they all do these same things, but they're not supposed to. And if they get caught, which Sugar is the only one who gets ever seems to get caught, but if they get caught, then their livelihood is in jeopardy.
The fact that they didn't get caught when they basically had a party, like, I'm
so
like,
insane.
I just don't understand how that didn't become a thing, but that's fine. We'll just gloss over it. I will say something that I found to be really funny on this watch was when they're rehearsing on the train and Sweet Sue kind of basically says to them, like, give us a little more. I thought you guys were,
a little more fire.
And then they like, I just love how Jerry starts like spinning this like bass in his hand over and over and over again. And like, that's his version of pizzazz. It's so great. And then he just like won't stop. And I think it's awesome. I love that action that his character does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so funny. They're trying. They're really trying.
Jack Lemmon is just so physical in this movie with his humor. It's so physical, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, he really is. He's so expressive as a performer. He's so good at using his body, his face, he just has so much. I mean, I said it before, but he has so much energy in this role. You know, he's always doing something. He's always saying something. He's always reacting to something. It's so great.
Yeah. Speaking of the little party that they have, I sent you a snap because I forgot how outrageous that party becomes, where it's just, you know, Jerry being smashed in this little bunk with all of these women. Where's the cheese? Like, I brought this and I brought this. Like, where did that come from? We need ice. It's just, he just gets completely overwhelmed in there. He's like, leave, get out, stop.
It's the tiniest little train bunk you can imagine, and there are so many women, crammed into it. It really made me think of did you ever see that Marx Brothers movie, A Night at the Opera, where there's like this tiny, so they're on a cruise ship and there's this tiny little room. Definitely look it up on YouTube afterwards if you haven't seen this.
I do like
this tiny
Marx
little
Brothers.
like Cruise Brothers stateroom, and Groucho Marx is in there, and people keep coming into the stateroom and they're like, oh, I'm here, you know, I have to go fix a lighting fixture in the corner, and you bring in your giant ladder, and then someone else is like, hey, do you want a manicure? And he's like, yeah, sure, come on in. And someone else comes on in bringing food. And so it's like, basically at the end of the scene, this tiny little stateroom has like 20 people in it, all crammed together, all trying to do things. And, you know, similar to what happens in this scene, finally someone opens the door and everyone just spills out everywhere.
Just falls
and
out.
It's like so many more people than you think could possibly fit in there. And it is so funny.
I also love the editing of that scene too, because this happens a few times in the movie where we have Jerry going through some experience that's like chaotic or funny or whatever, and then it cuts to Joe kind of doing something a little bit more quiet or serene or whatever it is. Then it goes back to Jerry and it's just chaos and insanity, and then back to Joe. And I love that balance of how this movie really just, I don't know. I love how Joe and Jerry are these very different people, and yet they somehow have this relationship where you can tell that they've been together for a long time and they know each other really well, and their friendship just works, even though they're very different people. But yeah, I just love, I guess specifically with this scene, I just love that editing choice of going back and forth between this like chaos of this party happening in this bunk with Jerry, and then Joe and Sugar having this, you know, quiet, personal, genuine conversation where we're kind of really learning about who Sugar is for the first time. And then we're cutting back again to screaming, and then we're going back to Sugar. I just think it's a really great juxtaposition of those two different dynamics.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And this is where we're also seeing Jerry really, so previous to this, Jerry's kind of experience of dressing up as a woman, his response has mostly been like, oh boy, I'm a horny man and I'm surrounded by women. This is great for me. But here's where we really start to see him be like, oh, I love being a woman. I love interacting with the world in the world as a woman. I'm like, he's hanging out with all these women and they're chatting and they're sharing drinks with each other and they're just like getting along. They're all just vibing. And he seems to be having a great time. And I love, well, even at the start of the scene before the party, how when he's like perched in the bed and he somehow has learned every single woman's name. And he's like, night night, Dolores. Toodaloo, Marielle, like, sweet dreams, Anita,
and Joe's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he just like, he fits himself right in. He really does.
I find it interesting though, because doesn't it happen later on in the story? I don't remember at what point this happens. I feel like it's almost right after they get to Florida. Isn't Jerry the first one who says like, all right, we made it here, let's leave? That like our only purpose was to just get here and let's go do something else. But then Joe is like, no, let's stay because I'm interested in sugar type of thing. I find it interesting that they get there and Jerry's like, all right, we got here, now let's go. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's not like a sudden like switch on. All of a sudden, he wants to live as a woman for the rest of his life or anything like that. It is kind of back and forth for a while. I mean, I feel like part of it is his experience with that long night he spends with Osgood, and his brain breaks a little bit. He's sort of, I feel like he's kind of changed forever after that one night. But
yeah,
I don't
which again, we see that happen with like the cutting back and forth between Joe and Jerry, of Joe having this very quiet, romantic, sensual, you know, makeout scene with Sugar. And then
you cut back
cutting
to
Jerry having
chaos.
this like over the top, like some type of tango dance with Oscar. Like,
where they're so serious about it too, which makes it so funny. The way they like hold the rose and like switch off with the rose in each other's mouth. It's so funny.
It's so great. I love it. I keep saying this, but it's just, yeah, I love it. It's so good.
It's so good. All right, I don't want to get too far ahead.
Anyway, that was jumping super far ahead, yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Well, we didn't really mention, but they meet Sugar Cane, played by Marilyn Monroe, on the train. She's the lead singer of the band, even though she says, I'm not much of a singer, but then again, this isn't much of a band, which is pretty great. As you mentioned, she has this talk with Josephine, in the bathroom, where she talks about how kind of her vulnerabilities. She's basically like, I'm really dumb because I keep going for the same type of man, and the type of man I'm into is a saxophone player.
Tenor
which
saxophone
is what
players.
Joe is. She's like, yep, they just play a little bit of sax and I'm just can't help myself. And Joe's like, huh, yeah, interesting.
Yep.
No, duly noted. But yeah,
doesn't Sugar say to Josephine like, yes, well, it's very good that you're not a man otherwise, or something like that.
But I'm a saxophone player, and she's like, yeah, but you're a girl, thank goodness. And he's like, yeah, good thing.
Yep, good thing.
But yeah, Sugar's like, she has kind of I mean, it's like kind of sweet and kind of sad in a way, where she's just like, yeah, I've kind of had a hard life. People are constantly, I keep falling for the wrong man who treats me terribly and leaves me with nothing. And but she has this sort of, you know, there's this naivete about her, but there's also this sort of sense of optimism, which I think is very sweet. Like I really do love her performance and everything that she's able to project. She's such a character that, you know, she's not a sort of one-dimensional dumb blonde. She is I don't know, I feel like she's a human to me, you know. I want to see her succeed. I want to see her meet the right man. I don't know if she does at the end, but she gets what she wants, and that's all that you can ask.
She definitely doesn't, in my opinion.
But, you know, she's willing to lie and manipulate to get what she wants in a way too, which is, I mean, I don't want to go too far ahead, but one of the things I love about this movie is the sort of it's like role reversal within a role reversal, because Joe's scheme ends up making Sugar the sexually aggressive one, which is so brilliant in the way that it's constructed. And I just really love that about it. You know, she's this kind of mix of someone who's kind of sweet and naive and has been put upon in the past, but also in this fantasy that she gets to play out with Joe, she gets to be the one who's seducing him. She gets to be the one who is...
She knows how to play to her strengths, that's for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Sugar. Anything else that we can say about the train sequence and everything that gets set up there?
I don't think so. Not that I can remember. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, Sugar, I guess the only other thing is that Sugar is like, yeah, my goal is I'm going to get to Florida. I'm going to find myself a nice rich millionaire, and
He's got to have a yacht.
he's got to have a yacht and wear glasses. I love it when men wear glasses. They're so
Oh,
sweet,
do you?
helpless and
Okay.
vulnerable. Yeah. Again, Joe is like, filing it away.
Taking notes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they make it to Florida. I love that that shot of the porch in the giant Florida hotel, where it's just a line of like 75, 80-year-old millionaires, all with newspapers in the exact same pose.
I will
all
say,
just hanging out, waiting for the truck with the women to arrive.
speaking to kind of something that I guess we both mentioned earlier, I love the feminism in this movie because it does not shy away from the fact that these women are beautiful, and because of that, they are automatically like preyed upon by everyone around them just by the fact of merely being women that look beautiful, and like and how
it's their
obnoxious
source of power
that can
and
be.
also their source of vulnerability.
Yeah, and just like how obnoxious that can be, how like impossible it is to avoid for them. And I just really love how that is established very early on. You know, from I think it kind of starts at the train and it continues on from there, and we really see it at its height here when they first enter the hotel, because we see all these women getting stared at, and then we have the sequence where like Jerry is obsessively hit on by Osgood, and I think
Osgood
Jerry's
is a full-on pest.
yeah, like I think Jerry's the one who gets pinched in the elevator, and then Joe is like hit. It's insane. And Joe and Jerry both have these conversations. I don't know if they have conversations with each other, but just kind of like mumbling to themselves, like, how do these women what is stand going on?
Basically.
Like,
yeah,
leave me alone. What I didn't even talk to you, and all of a sudden I'm being harassed.
Yeah.
You know?
Like
and
they have some line where they're like, you're wearing a skirt, it's like waving a red flag in front of a bull or something like that.
Yeah. And I love how this film really establishes that, and like I said, doesn't shy away from it, because it is a reality that still exists today. And I think that women should be able to dress beautiful and feel confident in that without also feeling nervous about being harassed. And
feeling like their mere presence is an invitation somehow to all of this harassment.
And I like the way that it's presented in terms of like, it's not showing harassment through the eyes of men, but it is trying to show men like step into a woman's shoes and really think about their experience. Like it's not mansplaining harassment. It's showing men like figuratively and literally step into a woman's shoes and see how this is, you know, just a part of their experience all the time.
Yeah.
For some people more than others.
Investigation of an expose of harassment.
Yeah. So anyway, I like how that's established. there's a lot of characters in this movie where I'm kind of conflicted about them by the end, because Osgood, like, I do think he genuinely he is straight up harassing Daphne. From the very beginning, and will not leave her alone. And that does really, really bother me. But at the end, we do see that he kind of genuinely does want to love Daphne, and he's kind of just clueless and isn't aware of what he's doing, and does have a kind heart and is really silly and frankly quite dumb. And so I don't know. I'm very conflicted about his character, because I do think some characteristics of him are super problematic. And I don't think the movie's arguing that they're not. But for me personally, I'm just like, I don't like I like where your relationship ends up with Daphne by the end, but I'm not happy with how it started.
Yeah.
So I feel conflicted about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a comedy, you know, it's like, let's take things that they would be horrifying if they were in the real life, but because we're going to exaggerate them to such an extent and also put them in the the mouths and actions of a character who is so cartoonish and so has this sort of boyishness to him. Like, you get the sense that he came from money and kind of just never really grew up mentally past the age of like 14.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
That
I would say like 10.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that allows you to kind of, it allows you to laugh at it while also still, you know, being a sharp look at, you know, how annoying at best and dangerous at most this sort of thing can be.
I just thought of this in the moment, and maybe it's incorrect, and if people want to disagree with me, that's fine, but Osgood kind of reminds me of Michael Scott a little bit in The Office, in terms of like, Michael, especially in the earlier seasons, he does a lot of really problematic things. Like, he's kind of racist, he's kind of sexist, he's kind of, you know, all these things that outside of the comedy world would be extremely not okay. He would have been fired immediately, like very problematic. But at the same time, he's so ignorant and innocent that you kind of can't really fault him for it, because he doesn't know what he's doing. So you learn to love him, even though, and so do the people in the office. Like, they learn to love him because they know that he's just stupid. And he's coming from the right place. He's almost just like repeating things that he's heard or doing things that he's seen other people do because he thinks this is what you're supposed to do, type of thing. He just acts without thinking. So I don't know. I feel like Osgood kind of reminds me of that a little bit, in terms of like, you're doing a lot of problematic things, but at the same time, I come to love you because I realize you don't actually mean it. And like, deep down, you are just kind of a gentle idiot who doesn't know what they're doing. And you just want love, and this is the only way you know how to do it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and his actions are always the butt of the joke. You know, it's not like the movie is sympathizing with him or getting humor out of like, haha, look at how he's treating these women. Yeah. It's, look at this idiot who doesn't know how to pursue a woman.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
he always just has this huge, crazy smile on his face. Like, it's so great. I think the casting of Joe Brown is fantastic because his face works so well for this role. Just the way that his face looks. He just looks like a giant sort of innocent, smiley face, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Even though he's like, I mean, I don't know how old he is. 65 maybe? I have no idea. I don't want to be rude to Joe Brown, but yeah, he works so well in this role. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So, I like that whole sequence when they enter the hotel. That's case in point. Yeah, all that is to say. It's great. Yes. So they're at the hotel. They're doing their gigs in the evenings. But Joe institutes his plan, which is basically he steals a bunch of male clothes and then he starts posing as a millionaire. Doing this like really really funny Cary Grant impression. I don't know if you caught that's what that was, but I mean, Jerry calls him out on it. He's like, what are you doing like that? Where did this voice come from? Yeah, it's so good. But he puts on the glasses and he pretends to be sort of, you know, vulnerable and sweet and like, oh, I'm just this kind of man who's not interested in women and you know, I don't really interact with women because once they know who I am, they just start chasing me. And of course Marilyn Monroe is like, Sugar Cane is like, ooh, her antennas go up and she starts pursuing him. And he's able to, again, with the persuading of Jerry, he keeps taking the things that Osgood offers to Jerry, or to Daphne, maybe I should say, and then utilizing them to pretend to be a millionaire, you know. So he's like, oh, Osgood wants to set up dinner on his yacht and take Daphne out. Well, instead, I'm going to have Osgood and Daphne stay on land, and I'm going to take Sugar to the yacht, and we're going to have a steamy night on the yacht. In just absolutely incredible sequence, cutting between the two. There's so much great humor in terms of how Jerry interacts with Joe's ridiculous game, because we have all these jabs where Jerry genuinely tries to have him get caught, where you know, first of all, he's like, oh yeah, if this guy likes you, he's definitely going to be there at the show tonight, right? Like, he'll definitely be at the show, even though he knows that's not possible. And then at the end of this beach scene, he's like, no, let's hurry back to the hotel. Yeah. We have to tell Josephine about everything that's going on, which leads to this incredible comedic moment where Joe stands up out of the tub and he is fully clothed.
He's been hiding in a bubble bath
because he raced back
he didn't have time
to take his man clothes off. All he had time to do was put a wig on.
Well, they have such a sibling dynamic where it's like, I'm going to toe the line of getting you into trouble, but I don't actually want you to get into serious trouble, you know?
Right.
Like, I want to see you suffer a little bit, but I don't actually want to see you get hurt.
Yeah. I love that kind of back and forth that happens between them, where Jerry kind of throws these jabs or tries to have him get caught or call his bluff or whatever it might be. And Sugar is just completely not aware of anything that's going on. And she just like does her thing. Yeah. Anyway, we can't move past this without talking about Jerry as Daphne in a bathing suit with a swim cap on. Like, and then Sugar's like, wow, you're so big. I never would have thought.
Your arms and shoulders are so big.
And I don't remember what Daphne's response is.
Oh,
but,
his response is like, oh, it's from carrying that bass fiddle around.
Oh, right. Yeah. I love how that's, you know, because I feel like if that hadn't been called out, all of us as an audience would have been like, all right, someone's gonna notice that.
Yeah, I mean, the whole way through, it is so ridiculous that no one realizes that these are men dressed up as women.
But yeah, so I like that they called that out, because if Sugar hadn't said something like that, I would have been like, all right, come on.
Guys.
Maybe I can believe it if they're wearing a loose dress that has like fake breasts under it. But when you're straight up wearing a skin tight bathing suit, like someone's gonna notice something.
Which, by the way, just costume wise, I think it's such a smart idea to set the story in the 20s, because they're wearing these, you know, that's the era of these looser dresses, kind of more shapeless. The very flat androgynous look was in to begin with. So there is a little bit more forgiveness, I guess, in the way that the dresses fit on Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon. And then you get the contrast with Marilyn Monroe, where she's sort of wearing what's nominally a flapper dress, but it is very much tailored to show off all of her curves.
I doth protest.
Yeah. And you have that great line where she's like, oh, I'm so jealous of you to Daphne. I'm so jealous of you. You're so flat-chested. Clothes hang so much better on you than they do on me. Like, no, Marilyn, clothes hang on you just fine.
Marilyn Monroe is definitely a person where, like, if I met her in person, I would have to be telling myself, eyes up here. Like, eyes up here.
This entire movie is just eyes up here, the movie. I mean, the dresses that they put her in, those two
they're
dresses.
Not dresses.
Where her breasts are basically full on.
I mean, they're like, not dresses. They're insane. Skirts. They are skirts with insane. Like pasties. They are skirts with pasties. They're not dresses.
Oh my goodness.
And like the backs are completely open. Like she's basically naked, like, you know, and it's just like, I mean, I think the casting of Marilyn is great and perfect for what they're trying to get at here, but like, dang, I feel like even for the 21st century, if someone was wearing that in a film, it would be like, wow.
Oh yeah, that
is really provocative. Yeah.
I have no idea how they got away with it. Just, I mean, this movie was made, so I was looking up kind of how they managed to release this movie with the Hays Code, the production code at the time. The production code was still around. It was still being enforced, but it was definitely on its way out. It was being weakened by basically one thing after another throughout the 50s. This movie was definitely, the fact that this movie was so successful wasn't the nail in the coffin, certainly, because it was still around for a few more years, but it was a pretty big blow, the fact that this could be released and be such a huge hit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. So yes, do we want to talk a little bit more specifically about that incredible, like, the two dates that are happening as they're cutting in between? Again, I just love the fact that Joe's whole scheme is predicated on the fact that even though he is normally in his relationships, the aggressor. He's always the one that's sweet talking the women into doing whatever he wants. And Marilyn Monroe, or Sugar Cane, in her relationships in the past has always been the one that's being seduced. There's this role reversal that's going on. It's engineered by Joe, but where she gets to be the one who's fully in power, the one who is, you know, he tells her like, oh, I'm so frigid, you know, I've never been able to, like, women have just never been able to do it for me. I don't understand. So I've just resigned myself to a life alone. She's like, oh no, that's terrible. I can help you. And she just starts furiously making out with him over and over again. Anything yet? Well,
no.
I felt something that time.
My
thanks
toes.
so much for trying to help me. Oh, it's so good.
Doesn't he say, what is the line? It's something of like, you've lit a flame within me, which leads to her saying, let's put another log on the fire. What does he say
something
first?
about like, I feel like my feet are on fire or something
oh,
like that.
yeah. I think that's
like
what it is.
I forget the exact line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the moment with Joe and Sugar is, in my opinion, I think it's very funny. The fact that Joe has gone so far into this act that he's just like, nope, still nothing. Like, still nothing.
He plays it so well.
Which, like, I feel like in real life that wouldn't be possible without, like, getting too explicit. I'm like, I don't, whatever. But,
yep.
I
see what you're saying.
It's fine. But also, even though, I think I love that both of these sequences are so funny, but in very different ways. But I honestly think my favorite my favorite moments in this movie are the ones with Jerry and Osgood doing their tango. Assuming it's a tango. I think it's a tango, but I'm not a dance expert, so I don't know. But that is just my absolute favorite moment of the film. I think it's hilarious, and it really is just kind of the full representation of Jerry coming into his own as Daphne, and like, I don't really see him ever going back.
Again, I think he's a little bit broken, a little bit. He's forever changed. You know,
well, it's like
his brain chemistry has been altered by that night.
It's like he's found this situation and this
not
person
broken, he's just changed.
That is allowing him to be himself for the first, like, I think that he's probably always had this within him, but he's never been in a safe space where he's been able to really let it out. And now that he's got this person, which, like, granted, like, harassed him a lot in the beginning, but now that he's found this person where he feels like it's safe for him to be, you know, this version of himself or his true self or whichever one it is, like, I don't see him ever going back. But that's just my own opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to, like, you know, hard to say exactly where the characters are since we only see them toward the end, but it definitely does seem like there's something in Jerry that has been there since the beginning and really grows into it throughout the course of the film. And
yeah,
I just love how many times at the end, you know, he'll be like, oh, I'm never going to find another man who's going to treat me the way Osgood has treated me.
Well, yeah, I know, it's so good. And I also love the reversal of how in the beginning Joe is like, you have to keep telling yourself, I'm a woman, I'm a woman, I'm a woman. And then by the end, he has to be very specifically telling himself, like, no, I'm a man, I'm a man, I'm a man. Because he just has gotten so, like, he's gotten so lost in this reality. He's like, I don't even know anymore. Like, who do I need to be in this moment? And who do I want to be? And who am I? And like brother, you know, brother, sis, whatever, like whoever you want to be, whoever you are, like, live it. That's fine.
I mean, I'm assuming they're all jetting off to like Osgood's private island or whatever he owns. And, you know,
they're just going to live the four of them.
Be the way you want to be.
You know, I feel like we've talked about this quite a bit with certain movies that we've discussed on this podcast. Like, they end and we just say, you know, I wonder where these relationships are going to go by the end. And this is a movie where I'm like, I feel like the four of them could exist on an island pretty contently for a while. I think that it would get to a point where Joe and Sugar kind of don't like each other anymore, but Sugar sticks around because she wants Osgood's, like, money. And I feel like it would just become this platonic, like they would be platonic
Foursome.
lovers, if that makes sense. I don't even know how to like. I don't know. I feel like they could last the four of them on an island for the rest of time, but I think that Sugar and Joe would have more of a platonic relationship, whereas Daphne and Osgood, I feel like they're going strong.
I love how Tatum's like, they're in it for the long haul.
I genuinely think that they are. Like, I just love it.
I say,
they're such a great combo. What else do they need? Like, they've got the money, they've got the love, they've got the compatibility. Like, if that tango dance doesn't communicate chemistry, then I don't know what does.
Their only obstacle, Osgood's mother's got to convince her somehow. But, you know, once she's convinced, maybe she'll lend Daphne her wedding dress.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, this movie.
Anyway.
All right, where are we? So, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yes.
So something that I made a note of, just adding to the ridiculousness of Joe and Sugar's kind of experience on the boat. We didn't even talk about how he gets on there and has no idea where anything is. He's like, oh, this door. No, never mind. This, not this door.
He like opens the door and it's a closet and he's like, yes, as you can see, we have great storage facilities here on the boat.
And then one of my favorite lines was when they were talking about like something about fish or whatever. And she's like, it's amazing how they can fit into these tiny little cans. And Joe's like, yeah, they shrink from the marinade. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, because it's like he sees this giant fish and he's like, it's a herring. Like clearly he has no idea what fish
a herring is. They
goodness.
shrink from the marinade. Oh my gosh.
They're two
so
con
good.
artists playing each other, and that's why it's
so good. Yeah. Anyway, I didn't take a lot of notes watching this film because I was just enjoying it, and a lot of the things I knew I would remember anyway. But one of the things I wrote down, because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget it, was they shrink from the marinade. It's like, I can't forget to talk about this. So there it is.
Can't forget it.
I also wrote Marilyn's blah, blah, blah. I wrote Marilyn's performance dress is provocative AF.
Yep, that sums it up.
Yep. Oh, also, I made it. Sorry, now I'm just looking at my notes for the first time. But I also made a note about like how this whole blood type O joke is just a running gag throughout the whole movie that is just whipped out whenever it needs to be whipped out. Like so many people talk about being type O or knowing someone who's type O, and each time the response is like, oh wow, that really means something. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it doesn't mean what you like what you're trying for it to mean, but that's fine.
Oh my goodness. I'm just looking through my notes now, which I hadn't really been looking at before. And I had a note from back on the train sequence when Sugar first like goes into Jerry's bunk and is like, oh, I better stay here until everything dies down. And I just wrote, Jerry is in horny agony.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's not hiding it at all. Nope. He's like, oh boy, doesn't he say that way? He's like, I'm a boy to himself. Yeah. Oh man. It's one of those things where he's like, yes, please come closer. Oh wait, no, don't. Wait, no, but I want you to come closer. All right. In a way, he should be thankful for the party because that would have, I mean, who knows where that would have gone.
Probably would have gone south if things hadn't, something hadn't intervened.
Yep.
All right, so back to where we were in the movie. So the next day, we find Jerry again has basically like lost his mind a little bit, and he's just like, he's now Daphne for good, basically. I mean, not for good.
He's accepted the proposal. They're gonna get married.
They're gonna get married. I love when Joe is trying to talk him out of it, and he's like, "You're not a girl. You're a guy. Why would a guy want to marry a guy?" And Jerry's like, "Security." Oh gosh. And Jerry has this diamond bracelet that Osgood has given him, and Joe's like, hey, wait a minute, those are real diamonds. And Jerry's like, yeah, what do you think? Is my fiance is a bum?
I love it. I love all of it.
It's so good. It's so good. Yeah, I mean, Jerry's just like full on board with marrying Osgood, and Joe kind of has to talk him out of it a little bit. I mean, it doesn't really take for good, but anyway. So I think after that is when we kind of, things start to build to a head. So Spats Colombo, the gangster from Chicago, which, what a great name that is, Spats Colombo. So good. Anyway, so he arrives at the hotel with all his goons, and there's apparently a convention for friends of Italian opera, which is going on, which is clearly just a like gangster convention that's happening in Florida in this exact hotel. So Joe and Jerry, they see Spats Colombo and they're like, oh no, we're gonna get caught, we have to get out of here. So some chasing ensues. At one point they dress up as a bellboy and an old millionaire, and then they go and run into the banquet hall and hide under
There's so
the table.
much in this like last whatever 15 20 minutes, however long it is. There's so much of like, oh boy, we're dressed as men, now we're dressed as women, now we're dressed as
keep
these
going
like
back and forth.
waiters, now we're dressed as women again, now we're dressed as like an old man in a wheelchair. Like it's just it's outrageous.
It really is.
I love it.
And all the while that this is happening, there's a mini gangster movie about like the politics of gangster wars going on in the background, where it's like Spats Colombo wants to take over little Bonaparte's territory, but little Bonaparte is sore at Spats Colombo for killing his old friend Toothpick Charlie, and so little Bonaparte sets up a whole birthday party for Spats Colombo, but then it's actually an assassination and he rubs out Spats Colombo. Anyway, so like all of this stuff is happening, and Jerry and Joe are just the sort of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of this whole Scarface movie that's happening on the sidelines.
I also love how they're running from different people. Like the first time around, they're trying to hide from Spats Colombo and all of his goons, and that's why they're changing back and forth because they don't know them as women, but they know them as the men. And then the next time around, after Spats Colombo is killed, now they're running from different people, but they know them as the women, not as the men. So like, okay, let's dress back into men. It's just like,
it is so funny to me that it's like, oh no, we're on the run from Spats Colombo, who knows our faces and want to kill us. And then it's like, oh no, Spats Colombo himself got rubbed out, so theoretically we're safe. But oh no, we're witnesses to that murder too. So now the even bigger gangsters after us.
Yep. And so what do they have to do? They have to sprint in heels for so long, and it's so funny.
So
but
Jerry
also
tells
really
Osgood,
impressive.
I'm going to elope with you. Meet me by the pier, and they just book it down to the pier, dressed as women. Can't forget that in the middle of all that chaos, a nice little like kind of sweet and romantic scene where Marilyn Monroe or Sugar Cane, having gotta back up. So many important things to talk about. So when they're trying to escape, Joe is like, I can't just run out on sugar, I need to actually break up with her. And so he does this whole like over the telephone breakup with her, posing as this millionaire, being like, I have to go to South America and like marry this Venezuelan oil princess or something. And she's like,
that's
it's okay,
funny,
I understand.
considering it's Shell oil.
Yeah. I like the part where she's like, oh, you don't apologize. You've given me a great tip. Tomorrow I'm going to go out and buy 50,000 shares of oil.
Don't do that, honey. Don't do it.
No, she doesn't have money to buy 50,000 shares. Oh, but yeah. So, and he like gives her the diamond bracelet, which Jerry's like, that's my bracelet. And he's like, no, it's our bracelet. No. Anyway, but yeah. So, then when they're trying to escape, Joe hears Sugar singing "I'll Never Love Again." She's all sad because she got broken up, and he just goes in and he listens to her, and then he walks up to her and kisses her, and everyone's like, Josephine, what are you doing?
Yep.
But then pretty quickly Sugar realizes what's going on and who he is, and she starts pursuing him. But it's
not very difficult to see that they're the same person.
There's a slight resemblance.
Yeah.
But it's just great, like sort of transgressive scene of just this woman walking up and kissing this other woman and being like, don't cry, Sugar, no man is worth it.
But great. Sugar also doesn't know at this point, when she like chases after Joe and goes to the dock, I don't think she knows that Joe isn't a millionaire at that point. So I'm like, she's still running after this guy who is not technically who he says he is.
Well, no, she has to know because she knows Josephine is a saxophone player. And
okay, I guess
she knows Josephine has been playing in the band, so she wouldn't be able to put it together everything at that point. But she's got to know at least Josephine / this millionaire has been lying to me, is not who I thought they were. Right. But I don't care because I'm just so into saxophone players of whatever gender that I can't stop myself.
And it just so happens that this one saxophone player that you're really into happens to have a connection to a millionaire with a yacht. So it's a win-win.
Win-win. Anyway.
She gets to what is it? Like bake your cake and eat it too, or have your cake and eat it too?
Yes, have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so they all pursued by Goon. They all pile into Osgood's little speedboat and speed off to his yacht, and Joe tells Sugar the truth, and Sugar's like, I don't care. And so they kiss. And then, again, we have that incredible final scene where Jerry is like, Jerry is like, I can't marry you. And he starts listing off all these excuses. He's like, I'm not a natural blonde. I'm not going to fit your mother's wedding dress. I've lived with a saxophone player my whole life, or, for the last 3 years. And I can never have children. And he's just like, it's all right. I forgive you. It's fine. It's fine.
What is Osgood's response to everything? Doesn't he say the same line every time? Isn't he like, what does he say?
No, it's different each time, because he's like, no, he's like, I'm not a natural blonde. He's like, I don't care. And he's like, I have a terrible past. For the last 3 years, I've lived with a saxophone player. And he's like, I forgive you. And he's like, I could never have children. And Osgood's like, we can adopt some. Like, he just has a response to everything. It's so great.
And all the while, a huge dumb smile on his face.
Yeah, just like not a care in the world. And then finally, Jerry takes off his wig and he's like, I'm a man. And Osgood's like, well, nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
And then just Jerry has such a stumped look on his face, like, wait, what just happened?
Yep. What does this mean for my future? Yeah.
All right. So that's the movie. Yeah. So other things that you wanted to, other notes that you have, or other things that you wanted to point out from the movie that we didn't talk about yet?
Not really. Because there's so many things, but we touched on a lot of the main ones. For me, I just love a lot of the physical humor of, we're climbing down the side of the building and you're seeing us as we climb down, and you're catching us through the window, and we're running into these rooms and disappearing and running out of a different room, and
I wanted to mention, there's
in
this
sand.
Really impressive scene where Tony Curtis playing the millionaire. I can't remember exactly what part it comes in where he just parkours up the side of a building, and it's like, it's all one unbroken shot. It's really Tony Curtis doing it, and it's very impressive.
Yeah. So, and also I think, if I remember correctly, when Joe goes home that night and after he climbs up the thing, don't Joe and Jerry both have this moment where they're both kind of like swooning in the bedroom, where Joe's just like, oh my gosh, I had this great evening with Sugar, and then Jerry's kind of like, I had this amazing evening, he proposed. Like, I think they both have this brief moment of just like swooning over their evenings until Joe's like, wait, he proposed and you accepted it? What's going on? But I like that.
Yeah.
Like,
well, there's that great line where Jerry's like, I'm getting married, and Joe's like, who's the lucky girl? And Jerry says, I am.
Yeah, it's great. I love their dynamic, and just how they go back and forth between, just like, not back and forth, but they're not friends to me. They're brothers, and their relationship just feels so sibling-esque, because that they love each other, and it comes through very clearly in certain moments because they explicitly act that way. But then there's other moments where they're just like peeved at each other, but it's like, oh, but it's because you guys care,
Yeah, they get on each other's nerves so much, but they are ride or die for each other at the end of it.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think that's everything. I just have, constant mental images in my brain of the two of them sprinting in their heels. I don't know why that is so like just relentlessly funny to me. It's so funny to me, but yeah, it's just imprinted in my mind. I can't stop seeing it over and over again. It's so funny. I think there's even a moment towards the end when they're doing their final sprint towards the boat, when they actually speed it up. Like in the editing, in post-production, like it literally looks like they sped it up. They're just running so fast. It's great. Oh yeah. Man,
I'm just going through my notes to see if there's anything else that I've missed. Yeah, so many little exchanges of dialogue that it's really hard to, like, every line, every exchange in this movie is gold,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a it's a great moment that I caught this time around where Osgood mentions like the first time he's trying to ask Jerry out on a date. He's talking to Joe on the phone. He's like, "Yeah, come onto my yacht for dinner. Tell I've got a new batch of Rudy Valley records," which I've only recently learned who Rudy Valley is, and he's this like crooner from the 30s. So that's like, you know, an older guy being like, "Oh yeah, I've got a bunch of records from this guy who was popular 30 years ago." Like, how cool am I? Anyway. Yeah, so do we want to move then into talking a little bit about the awards this movie won and the legacy and whatnot?
Sure.
All right. So, yes, as I mentioned, this movie was a big hit. And it received really great reviews. As of now, obviously, 65 years later, it's kind of hard to get really accurate readings on these sorts of things, but Metacritic has it at 98, which is a very high score. Rotten Tomatoes has it at 94% positive. At the time, in terms of awards, so it won the Oscar for Best Black and White Costume Design, and it was nominated for 5 other Oscars. So it was nominated for Best Director for Billy Wilder, Best Actor for Jack Lemmon, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Black and White Cinematography, and Best Black and White Art Direction. Which, man, I love the days when you would have separate categories for black and white costume design versus color costume design. Because it really is an art form, you know, designing costumes and designing sets and art directing shots to look good in black and white. It really is a skill. I pulled the Variety review for this movie from 1959. So I thought it had some really interesting points. So first, this quote says, "Some Like It Hot, directed in masterly style by Billy Wilder, is probably the funniest picture of recent memory. It's a wacky, clever, farcical comedy that starts off like a firecracker and keeps on throwing off lively sparks till the very end." Which I agree with. Yeah. And further on in the review, they talk about Marilyn Monroe specifically. They say, "To coin a phrase, Marilyn has never looked better. Her performance as Sugar, a fuzzy blonde who likes saxophone players and men with glasses, has a deliciously naive quality. She's a comedienne with that combination of sex appeal and timing that just can't be beat." I would agree with that as well. And then our good old friend Roger Ebert had what I thought was a very insightful review of this movie from around the year 2000. So I pulled this quote, which says, "Wilder's 1959 comedy is one of the enduring treasures of the movies, a film of inspiration and meticulous craft, a movie that's about nothing but sex and yet pretends it's about crime and greed. It is underwired with Wilder's cheerful cynicism so that no time is lost to soppiness and everyone behaves according to basic Darwinian drives. When sincere emotion strikes these characters, it blindsides them. Tony Curtis, thinks he only wants sex. Marilyn Monroe thinks she wants only money, and they are as astonished as delighted to find that they want only each other."
I highly disagree with everything he said in that review, but that's fine.
Interesting. What do you disagree with about it?
All of it. I don't think it's a movie that's about nothing but sex and yet pretends it's about crime and greed. I think that's very wrong. I don't think it pretends to be about crime and greed at all. I think crime and greed is very, like, it's kind of just a framing device. Like, that exists in order to create the story. But at the same time, I don't think the movie is only about sex either. I don't think it's really about sex at all. I think it's about, like, friendships and building relationships and just like trying to navigate your way through the world when you're down and out and doing whatever you can, and like comedy that ensues. I don't see it being about sex at all. I also don't see this movie being cheerfully cynical. Like, I don't think that everyone's behaving according to basic Darwinian drive. Like, I don't think Curtis thinks he wants only sex. I don't think Monroe thinks she wants only money, and I don't think that they find that they only want each other. Like, what? I don't think this review is wrong in the sense of like it's poorly written or he totally missed the point of the movie. Mm-hmm. It's just, for me personally, I'm like, did we not watch the same movie? Like,
do you disagree with the interpretation? Well, I think I don't think it's about nothing but sex, but I think one of the things I love about this movie is about how much of it is about these sort of earthy human emotions and desires and how they drive people in different and really passionate and sometimes really unexpected ways. And I mean, so much of the movie, it's about sex. It's also about gender and gender performance and sexual desire and sexual urges. And I think that's just a very, it's a human, relatable, timeless motivation that I think is one of the reasons that the movie works so well.
I just feel like this review is primarily focused on Joe and Sugar, like their relationship, and not really mentioning much about reflecting much about the arc of Jerry or the storyline of Osgood. It just feels very focused on the sex-charged relationship of Sugar and Joe, which I don't.
It's one part of the review. I only pulled a section of it. He does go on to talk about those things as well.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that he thinks this is a movie that's about nothing but sex and yet pretends to be about crime and greed. I don't see that at all. But
well, one thing that he talks about, which I thought was really interesting, is this idea of the contrast between the two relationships, where the Curtis Monroe dynamic is sort of the more traditional romantic dynamic, and then the Lemon Joey Brown dynamic is kind of the more screwball. It's like you have the leads of your comedy, and then the sort of comedic characters who are sort of doubling and contrasting with them, which I thought was an interesting paradigm to put onto it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Final thoughts. How would you, if this movie for you is not all about sex, how would you sum it up? So it's about friendship, sounds like.
Yeah, if I were describing this movie to anybody, I would not be like, okay, some like it hot. First of all, it's about sex. Like, no. Not at all to me.
But some like it hot, Tatum. Some like it hot.
I mean, yes, but also hot can mean lots of things. Hot could mean like, oh, Jerry's hot now that he's Daphne, or like there's lots of different ways to interpret hot in this movie. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I've said a lot of my favorite things. I mean, I think the fact that in the very beginning I said that there's an argument that could be made that this is the greatest comedy of all time. Like, I don't know what more I can say beyond that. So I won't. I will just finish with that as my final thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about so much of this movie. It's hard to kind of pull out one thing or one reason this is stuck with me, because it's all just so of a piece. It's just all so funny, so well made, so well performed, so well written, so timeless. So, yeah, great movie.
Geneva and I both love this movie.
I love it when we agree on things. All right, so would you like to tell our lovely audience which film we're going to be covering in the next episode?
Yeah, we're taking a huge tonal shift.
A nosedive into the sad territory.
We will be depressed next week, and it's going to be great. I'm here for it. We haven't been depressed on this podcast yet, I don't think. So let's do it. But anyway, we will be
BoJack Horseman.
Oh man, yeah. Next week we will be discussing a very important film for me called $1 Million Baby from 2004, directed by Clint Eastwood and starring also Clint Eastwood, Hilary Swank, and Morgan Freeman. I don't think Geneva, actually no, I'm positive that Geneva has not seen this movie.
I have never seen this movie. No.
I also know that Geneva does not like sports movies a lot of the time. But also she hasn't seen many sports movies, so she can't. That's my thing. I'm like, you say you don't like them, but how many have you seen?
Movies. It's that I don't care about sports. And so if a movie is primarily based around asking me to care about who wins a game, I'm not going to care. If the movie gets me to care about the characters and what motivates them and their struggle, then I will care. So we'll see how I feel about this movie. From what I understand of this movie, it is not super about the sport itself. It's very much about the characters.
I will say very quickly, and then we can let a sleeping dog lie, because Geneva and I have had this conversation many times in our friendship. But liking sports is not about liking sports. It's about knowing how those sports impact the players and the strategy of the game and the experience of the emotional camaraderie. Like, it's not just like, oh, I like basketball because I like watching a ball go into a hoop. Like, it's not how it works. And most sports movies are not about a team winning a game. They're about, let's talk about the characters and why they love the sport and what the sport means to them. And anyway, so that is my my short defense of not defense, because I don't feel like I need to defend, and I also don't feel like you're attacking, but that's just my explanation of liking sports. It's not about liking sports.
Did I ever tell you that, because we've talked about Friday Night Lights and how inexplicable it is that I've gotten really into Friday Night Lights when I'm not a sports person at all. Did I ever tell you that the rewatch podcast that I've been watching alongside the show, which I'm really enjoying, by the way, pretty decent rewatch podcast, is literally called It's Not Only Football. And at the beginning of every episode, the hosts all say, this episode was not only about football, so what was it about for you?
Fuck yeah. I'm here for it. That's going to be me next week with $1 Million Baby, and every single sports movie that I bring. That's going to be...
It is boxing, right?
Yes. Okay, that's going to be me for every single sports movie I bring on this podcast, because I have several on my list, because I love sports movies, because they're not just about sports.
Yeah, I mean, throw them on. Honestly, I mean, I never really thought I was a war movie person, but there are some war movies that are among my favorite movies. So I'm not averse to trying out the genre. Sports itself, the concept of sports tends to make my brain shut down. But when I get into a movie, if it's a good movie and it's compelling characters, then I'm going to like the movie. So
I think that if you don't like this movie, which you honestly might not, I think that if you don't like, just kidding. I think that if you don't like this movie, it's not going to be because of the sports aspect. It's going to be because of how depressing it is and how certain aspects of the storytelling are not necessarily the best. So I do think that there's a chance you might not like this movie, but I don't think that it will be because of the sports.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, to be quite honest, I have not seen this movie, watched this movie yet for next week's episode, so we will see what my reaction is. But I have never seen this movie, and I've always kind of avoided it just because I have that impression that it's kind of depressing in addition to being about sports. So
it is one of the most depressing movies I've ever seen.
We will see.
So good luck. If you need to call me for emotional support when you finish it, give me a call. I understand. Oh, boy. I remember the first time I watched this movie. Oh boy, that was a time. Anyway, next week we are talking about $1 Million Baby, released in 2004. Stick around. I'm very much so looking forward to talking about it. It's a very special movie to me. So
the movie may not be a good time, but hopefully our episode will be.
Oh yeah, we always have a good time, don't we? Don't know why I'm talking like this.
Why are you?
I don't know. Okay.
All right. I think it's time to say goodbye.
Yeah. We've been on enough tangents in this episode, I feel like.
Yes. I feel like, I mean, you watch a movie like Some Like It Hot and you can't help but feel a little bit giddy by the end.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, everybody. And until next time, bye.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at yourpickpod@gmail.com. Our theme song was composed by Joel Rushton, and our podcast graphic was designed by Kara Shin. If you like this show and want to hear more, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're excited to have you on this journey with us. Until next time.